So I'm actually logged in as an administrator within our current IQ setup in our demo environment. You can have access to it as well. At the end of the slides, we will have a link for this to our webpage, which will give you full access to it. Because we are a caching system, as Rob pointed out, on that environment, essentially what we do is go out and connect to the target systems that you see here. Now, each target system is slightly different from each other. So depending on the system itself, if it has an API that can talk, or if it's got an SDK, for example, or a direct read into the database, WhatsApp Gold is a good example there from, really depends on the integration. Each integration works slightly different. These are our current ones out of the box. For Nagios users on the call, that is basically any single version of Nagios, including the older ones that don't have live status. We actually do provide an API that switches that on for them. If you don't see your solution on there, I get this question lots of times when I do demos for specific environments. We do have our API. It's RESTful, does allow you to pump the information into our data store, and that makes it accessible for the dashboards. Essentially, administrators will be able to come in here once they've installed. It's about a 15-minute to 20-minute process, depending on if you have your server ready or not. Be able to target the information, the target system that they want. So if it's System Center Operations from Microsoft, you just simply put in a tag for what you want in here, the server that we need to talk to, and an account that we use. This generally doesn't have to be administrator, and in fact for the ServiceNow and ITSM tools is advised against administrator because they don't have the abilities to create tickets in their own tools, but any account that you give us is what we have access to it. Each integration has a few configuration settings depending on the system. Some of the older systems like SCOM, for example, doesn't have an API, so we tend to choose to do direct pulls from the database, which can speed up the integration level. Really not dependent if you guys are using smaller versions of SCOM or multiple small dispersed versions. In my environment, I have quite a few hooked up. These are the current ones that are running. Some of them have issues, some of them don't. They are all flowing data into the system, which from a user perspective or administrator is visible underneath these three options at the top here. Very simple, very easy approach. Under Home, you'll be able to come in and see tabs of the data. So you can see at the moment here, I have close to 1,092 objects that look like computers. As you can see from the listing here, there'll either be a computer, a physical host, a virtual machine, or a derivative of that. As you can see here, just on the quick list, I have a health state being pulled from the target system. I have a name which is also associated with the system itself. I have a type and the physical integration that's pulling it in. Clicking on any one of these will give me access to more data around that object. So any of the property fields that you'll be able to pull from your system. Again, each system varies slightly. So you'll see PRTG has this. If I go and have a look for a SCOM system, it will potentially have a little bit more in my environment because I've deployed more fields in there. Azure has quite a lot, in fact, and Splunk and ServiceNow will have quite a lot of fields as well. Let me just clear that search out so you can see it. So as you can see there, very easy to zoom in on the information to see what the component is, its current health state. I have 1,000 objects in here. I have close to 226,000 alerts. Gulp, don't worry, it's not all live. Those are actually historical ones just to show you that we can handle lots of information in the system. This is running on bare minimum. Advised setup, but for most of our customers, we can help you out with setting up the cache store and the memory requirements to keep this fast and fluid as you see here. I have also quite a lot of incidences ticking in here, tickets. I have 10,000 of them plus in this scenario, and anything else that's not labeled as a computer, so your network devices, your switches, your ports, they will flow into what we call our components pane. So you can see here, there's a little bit more spread in here where you can actually see Prime, our Martello monitoring platform, PRTG, and a few other systems. Now, that's all nice and dandy, Justin. How do I get access to this information and how do I keep track on it? Well, very simply, you saw up here, we have a Google search bar. I'll just zoom in a little bit just to make that a little bit more visible on my screen. So in here, any 3-letter search or 3-letter plus search will get you the ability to zoom in through all of that information. So as you can see there, I went through close to, what was that, 100,000+ objects in a matter of milliseconds to narrow down just the 2 SQL components that are actually monitored from 2 different target objects at the moment. So SCOM is telling me I have a problem, it's not that bad, but my network monitoring platform is actually telling me, that SQL, which is actually the same SQL, has got an issue. Potentially it can't talk on a certain port that we're pinging at this moment. Again, I can zoom in on the information. I'll just zoom out a little bit. So I've narrowed it down on the search to get what I want to do. I've had a look in the properties to see why that search matches what I want. And this is where I'll mention that we can search against anything. So IP ranges, tags that you use, text fields that are placed in there, even tagging in ServiceNow will get you the ability. So if you know which application or which department or which location it's in, you can physically search for that. And you can narrow down the searches. I'll show you a few examples of this. You can zoom in on that information. So we'll take a step down and get a little bit more data around this server. So here are the properties again, just to make sure I'm looking at the right one. Here I get a quick overview of it's got one open alert and there are 4 tickets raised for that object in potentially ServiceNow, my top desk, or Jira, which are the 3 systems I have hooked up at the moment. In the last 7 days, it's been not in a red state, which is yay for infrastructure teams. Here are the discoveries against it. Again, this is what we're pulling from the target system. So these boxes and lines will be populated with the more discoveries you get in your systems. Those of you who know SCOM from here, that's going to be your management packs. So you have the ability to see this is a SQL server, that's a SQL database. If I click on this, you'll get more properties around it. That's the name of the database, that's where it presides on, and this is the type it is. It's name SQL. I get a list of all the live alerts, and I can look back historically if there have been any other alerts. So as you can see, things are being closed and worked on regularly here. I can also do that with the tickets that are coming from ServiceNow against this object at the moment. If at any stage, this is the level that we get to, I want to see a little bit more detail on there, we have within a click of a button, you'll notice it on various different parts when I click on alerts or incidences or tickets, what we call a go to source button, which essentially opens up a tab and attempts to log you into the web front end of whatever system that data is flowing into. So for SCOM, we're using our SCOM integration dashboarding system, which for those of you who may know us from before is called Live Maps as well. And as you can see, essentially logging into here, I get the exact access to the information. So this is where I'll dive down, pull out the performance characteristics that I'm really interested on that disk or on the component that's failing at that moment directly from the data source. Now that's not a Windows single sign-in. As you can see, when we log to other systems, like if I want to go and have a look at ServiceNow, ServiceNow is obviously form set up on the web for me. This is their partner portal. So if I go to the source here, it will not be able to log me in. I will have to log in with a user account. That said, I think I actually just logged in before a demo, so this might go directly to the system. It's not Windows single sign-in. It's good to mention that to get access to the underlying systems, you need to administer users to get access into the system. If you don't want them to see that detailed information, don't give them an account. All they'll get to see is the level of health information that you're sharing up in the top level here. Literally, I've not done anything within our system yet. I have just shown you what's immediately accessible for you. So you will get this list of data pouring in as soon as you get your integrations hooked up from there. So what can you do with the data? Well, let's go back to the searches and see what's possible with that. If you come up with a great search that allows you to keep an eye on information and you want to save it, you can simply press the save button, and this dashboard with tiles will save that search and give you live results. So for example, here I have had in the last 24 hours, 180 critical alerts hit my system. By clicking on the tile, I get that search pulled in, I get the live list to work at, and I can start diving into what those alerts are doing. Of course, I can tailor that to say, well, what did it look like 2 hours ago? And I see that that's reduced down to 31, and I can probably keep going to a couple of minutes to see the last ones in the last few minutes. This way we can handle a stream of a lot of data information so that you can actually work through multiple tools from a single place. When I say work from them, you also have the ability on most of the systems that we can talk two-way with to actually action on them. So what I mean by that is we have a very simple interface at this level that you don't have to dive into your underlying system, where you can resolve an alert, and that'll essentially put it onto the underlying system's closed, resolved, acknowledged settings, depending on the system itself. So for SolarWinds and Peer2G, that tends to be acknowledged. For SCOM, that tends to be closed. If possible, through the connection that we do on the API, we will reset the monitoring on that. So for example, in SCOM, closing alert, you actually think that you fixed the problem, we will go and tell SCOM to close down that problem, reset it from red to green, and start monitoring again. If you haven't fixed the problem, don't be surprised. In a couple of minutes, you get another alert, and that object switches back to red. Haha, things need to be cleared off of that disk. One of the other options you can do from here as an action point is pick up that ticket or select multiple tickets and raise these within your ITSM platforms if connected. So immediately we can start streamlining the alerts or to other users. If you say, hey, this is not something I can fix, but someone else needs to pick this up, you can literally come in here, place in the fields that you need to fulfill within your ITSM tool, and forward that on as an incident. Within a couple of seconds, that will also show within our incident tab as we refresh against that target system. You may notice down here, we have an ability to track that incident, and if the ticket gets closed down in ServiceNow, in my case, then the alert or the associated alerts around that ticket will also attempted to be resolved from out our system. So it's an upstream, downstream flow from that. So it's not just fire and forget. By the way, this is the manual approach. And again, you can select multiple of these. However, you're going to see when we start grouping the information together, you can actually automate that. And that's what Rob was talking about, how to reduce our alert notifications going to your systems simply by getting the tickets to raise on the way that you want them. So for example, you could do tickets against critical websites. Your web team needs to get a ticket within ServiceNow to say, hey, you have 2 critical websites out of all the websites we monitor, disk full, or specific terms within any one of the alerts. And keep in mind, that's not just an alert from one system, that can be from many systems in there as well. That's one way to use the saves. The other way to use the save is to actually physically come and search for the objects that you want. Keep in mind that your save list could be simply these 2 objects if you get down to your IP ranges or your tags that you want. Pressing save on that search will allow you to generate this as a search term. I'll just do SQL for order entry, which you will see shortly as a service map that I have created in here. I can select the tabs that I want it to populate, so I only want the computers that are matching the search string, and then I can save that rule, which becomes a dynamic updating rule. So if one of my underlying monitoring tools suddenly discovers another server called the SQL, which is my basic rule, it will instantly add it to either the dashboard I'm creating or the service that I'm creating. So let me just create it as a simple dashboard to show you that. Here's a list of existing dashboards, but I will quickly create a new one for you here so that you can see we have an ability to control at the dashboard level how that looks for the general public. What I mean by that is SQL tends to be clustered. If you get all your databases together, high availability, we even look at web components, IIS farms, or even network devices where you have overflow. Potentially on your dashboard, you don't want to show the management that it's red when 1 out of the 3 objects in the dashboard is red. Important for you guys to know and to fix, the infrastructure team. But for the business, what you probably want to do is just show them best case, which is a very simple click from us. Means our dashboard will stay green as long as 1 object in the dashboard you create is green. Now, let me just pin that. That will go off and create a board in our board overview over here. Very simple way to share information with the business. So before this webinar, you will see that I've been a little bit busy. Don't panic. Not everything's red. If I scroll down, you will see, because I'm an administrator, I get to see all of the boards that everyone creates in my system. There are multiple scenarios in here. This is the SQL for order entry that I created moments ago, which you'll see if I flick this over onto heat map, you will have the ability to see the 2 objects that are grouping in here. And in a couple of minutes, that will roll up its health state, potentially going to be red or yellow. I do have some other boards already created in here for various different scenarios. So I'll just flick it onto what we call the knock mode, which is very handy for large screens. And you can see one of the scenarios that I'll pay attention to, the first one we see a lot of users use, is a geographic spread. Now that could be your data center, that could be your stores, that could be your offices, that could be remote workers, whatever you're monitoring within there. Within my system, there's 2 ways to look at this. I can either look at all the components that are within the various areas. So I have Amsterdam, New York, Copenhagen as data centers. I even have Office 365 because that's not a data center I run, but I have to make sure that stuff's available, as well as the Ottawa location where Rob is sitting. There are various different components in here. I can see immediately from this that New York's probably got a very big problem going on right now because half of the objects are not reporting their health statuses to their monitoring system. So that's probably one I want to go and check in. I can keep an eye on all the alerts from all the components I've grouped together, again, from every system. So I can see that Office 365, by the way, this is live. So if you guys are located in Europe, this is probably happening for you. There's a service degradation right now on Exchange Online. This is actually what the portal from Office 365 is telling us. Now, luckily, I can also go in and have a look if my network devices are down, just to make sure that users can still get there, but at least I can inform them up at this stage that there are potentially problems with Exchange Online if this is going to impact the end user part for them. And we grab all the tickets around there. So already just grouping the data together, I can sort of pre-filter all of that vast information that's flowing in or flowing out from my systems straight away. By grouping them together into a data center or grouping them into sub data centers, I also enable that feature that Rob was talking about, where we can actually notify you if changes happen. So that could be as simply as I've got here, when a new alert hits the board, or potentially what I would definitely advise you is a board state change, which essentially would mean if one goes from red to green based on your settings, you will get a notification or an action happen. Now, an action can be very simply an email push, a team or a Slack notification to a team channel so that you guys get pushed out to it, an SMS push, or a PowerShell script. So we do have the ability to trigger PowerShell scripts. We don't provide them. You guys can have them stored on the system, but you can have a PowerShell script literally pack out from here as well. Essentially, by doing board state change in there, that means that if one object or multiple objects go red in here, I will only get one notification on there. That also then ties in potentially with the automation of the notifications to the ticketing system. So this is where we can set up automatic incident creation. At this stage, I probably wouldn't do it with my geographical layout unless my teams needed to be notified of tickets, potentially in Ottawa or in Amsterdam separately from me. But that is a scenario that we come across quite regularly with our MSPs, who have probably dedicated teams to support dedicated customers. So for example, we have down here, I have that example, MSP. Looks like someone's put that onto a green status here for me. Here's an MSP scenario. Again, simply just dividing your information. You could potentially have dashboards, customer 1, 2, 3, with all of their objects separated out. If you want to share it with your customers or individual teams, you can actually block that the users don't get to see the other customers. So you could literally just label out the customers that that team needs to know and be notified about, and they will get live information. And again, we don't block usage of this. So when the notification goes out to ServiceNow or to the email box or to Slack, they will literally get a URL that will drive them back to this dashboard. So you can show them the individual components and information that's important to their daily tasks and their daily incident pickup. One of the things that we run into when the scenario is there is, unfortunately, that putting thousands of objects together in that data center overview, or potentially your email service or exchange service or your application Active Directory, leads to this box being read a hell of a lot of the time. Because the more objects you have, the more alerts you'll get. From the alerts that you get, the more tickets you'll get. Even here, Active Directory is red, and I've only got one live alert at the moment. Let's have a look at the heat map that's on there, where I can see that there are multiple objects on there. But Active Directory, if my boss was to walk by on my knock center, would say, hey, are you guys working on that? Is that a real big problem? You and I know that Active Directory is working right now, otherwise I wouldn't be able to log into any of my systems. So no, it's not a major problem, so let's not freak out that team. So how do we show that to the business that makes a little bit more sense? And that's that service model that Rob was referring to, is where we split out the red box to actually layer it into this service overview, where we can start looking at Active Directory from potentially different points of view. What I mean by that is, left-hand side, you'll see Active Directory. Dallas has an issue. Looking at this column, I can represent that the end user components are green. So the tests that I'm running from my APM tools, or from my SCOM, because SCOM can actually just test a simple relationship, or from my network devices, are the ports open, or from essential user synthetic transaction testing that I may have in a script or something, it's coming back green. That's good because I'm logging into stuff, so that's actually proving that people can log in. You can have multiple tests underneath here to prove it from multiple locations. I have actually multiple services, so I have Active Directory Dallas, and I think if you look down a little bit further in the green, you'll see Amsterdam's in there separately as well. I do that for SLA reporting, which we'll come back shortly on. I can see immediately that there is a problem in the application layer. Drilling down to the application layer, I'll go and find out the actual physical problem, the site, the domain controller, the forest, or whatever it is that is requiring my attention to go and fix. This way I can stay ahead of the curve, so I can actually see problems before they impact the users. So even though I have a big sea of red above here, I'm not freaking out too much because most of the end users can get it. However, my VoIP service, my telephone services, my unified communication, that is a problem. That's a real life scenario that you guys have to probably look at today. These service maps you can build and generate how you want. We can rely on relationships that are already built in underlying systems. If you are a customer of our SCOM controlling system, a lot of these will be automated. An example is we have a lot of our customers now looking at Citrix, because Citrix is a really big scenario looking at COVID-19 and how users are working from home, needing their desktops. We've actually helped a lot of customers deploy our out-of-the-box Citrix service map on their management packs into SCOM, and then pump them into here to grab extra data from SolarWinds or Peer2G to show that people can actually access their work from home. That means that your infrastructure could be filled up with your network devices where, potentially a lot of those devices could be impacting other services. We track that as well. I just zoomed out a little bit to show you that you can, once you've built out your service map layering and you're pretty certain that all the objects are in there, or you've used our dynamic rules to make sure all the objects auto update into there, you can also map out the relationships. So you can say Active Directory supplies a lot of services and potentially is now impacting them. And that could be a reason why my VoIP service is down or about to have a lot of major impacts. Maybe that one domain controller or that site has problem logging in the users. We also gather information from the other target systems. So you can see here to help prioritize where your resources have to go. Actually, the hybrid service looks like the most important from a monitoring aspect. It's generated 44 alerts from all its monitoring tools, where it's also very high on my tickets at the moment. So 303 incidences exist for ServiceNow. It's the one I always demo to show that I'm creating tickets. So that's one potentially I want to focus on a little bit more than Link at the moment, where there's 12 alerts and only one ticket being raised by a user potentially. Hopefully they can still use Link. Obviously that's right now is going to be prioritized for me and COVID-19. Once you've grouped all those components together and you can start seeing it, the next column starts tracking the SLA, which you can control on various systems. So you can see down here, I have a couple of services which are green on the left, like for example, Jurgen service or Parimatch or Office Online, where there are still reds to be had. But the agreement I have with the business is to make sure that the service is delivered. So the SLA I track is purely the end user part. So that's staying up in the air and I can show them that report. However, at any time, I can dive down onto the service and get an SLA overview. So not just a map of what's supporting the application, the infrastructure of the end user part, which alerts are there, which instances are there, but actually track the availability against the service and how it's been performing over that time. So you can see here, the end user is doing very well over a month period. We did have some problems back in January, where we can actually zoom in on that and have a look at the downtime. And unfortunately, I think I'm not going to be able to do on this service. So let's go grab another service because that service didn't exist, or that feature didn't exist in January. So let's grab order entry, which I know is showing something today and yesterday, where we can actually zoom in and say, I'll just explain this dashboard. Left-hand side is the downtime. So the bigger the red bar that you see, the more downtime you've had. So the 24th, I had 20 hours of downtime. I had 24 hours of downtime on the 25th yesterday, and I'm about to have some nasty days today on the service. Bit of a pity. I'm still hitting my target, which is the green tile here at the moment. My target being 80%. Right now it's at 92. However, if I don't do anything in the next 94 hours for this month, that's going to be a big red box for me, and I'm going to have some explanation to do. In real time, I can take a dive back onto yesterday and find out exactly what caused the problem yesterday. You can see immediately here, it's the Cisco switch, which over the last 7 days has been down quite a lot. So potentially this is the main root cause for the downtime I'm having in my service. Let's just take a step back the day before, and you can see the day before I had a lot of individual problems coming from Cisco Prime objects and Peer2G. So yeah, I can safely say that that Cisco object is something we probably need to look into on the magnifying glass, diving into the monitoring systems and finding out what they have information-wise that could lead me into what's caused this, or just have a look at the regular alerts that come up around that time frame and see if it's something that my team is actually capable of fixing. So diving down into here, I can see the Cisco alerts from Peer2G. I can see they're being acknowledged, and I can see that there are a lot of alerts within here that are being picked up. This way you can start slicing, dicing the information, start providing the SLA context to people in real time, and give them the ability to start planning potential future resource investments for their application. Again, slightly different than just handing them a console to your monitoring platform and saying, hey, sort it out yourself. Here's a lot of performance characteristics that are trying to tell you that your disk fills up every time in the simple days, where we focus on making it very easy for you to share. Everyone understands a web page and everyone understands red, green, yellow as being a problem. I'll pause there because that covers most of the scenarios that we have in here, and I think that would wrap it up in here. Rob, just looking at you, I don't think I missed anything particularly.
No, I think there was a question about explaining what SLA percentage means, the last few minutes as you walked through and described how that's a reflection of the health for all the components underneath and the different ways that we can roll that up. So I hope that question has been answered.
Yeah, I'll just flip this open because I get this during demos as well. So the SLA is, the goal is pretty much manually set for you. You can set your time period of how long that's tracked for. Obviously your time zone for the services, because if you're spread around multiple time zones. And if it is important for your business, you can track what part of the day that has to be available. So if you have red outside of 5 o'clock, outside of these days, doesn't impact your SLA on the tracking. This is different than an availability monitor test. You still want your underlying monitoring tool like SCOM or Peer2G to actually keep monitoring it, because when you come in at 7 o'clock in the morning, you need to make sure that thing's green, otherwise it will start impacting your SLA outside of that. So that's what this refers to. It also does get impacted by the details that we set up here in the service as to which health roll-up should impact your SLA. And you can do combinations of it. So for this service, for example, end user and application are what's adding up to its availability report on there. If I click on infrastructure, then everything in that row will then add up to the SLA, and it will do a recalculation from this moment onwards. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yep. So maybe time for two more quick questions. One I can cover is around deployment, whether this could live in the cloud. The answer is yes. We do have a number of customers who run IQ completely in the cloud with some collectors on premise. It's not today delivered as a true SaaS application. However, everything in the product itself has been designed with web protocols and communication. So the dashboarding, the data, everything can live in the cloud with data collectors on-prem, and the data collectors on-prem feed data into the system. And that can be running in AWS or Google Cloud or Azure. It doesn't really matter. So that's one of the questions. The other one, Justin, maybe you can quickly touch on before we jump to the last slide, is around roles, how users can control what parts of the application they can see and cannot see through role-based access.
Yep, just to add on your cloud components, from an administration point of view, there is a way to track how much data you're using, which is obviously a big concern with using cloud services, costings. There's also an agent system within us that allows us to go cross-domain. So when you do shift us into the cloud, or you want to monitor stuff in the cloud and you've only got certain ports open, we can act remotely across the domains to get the data centralized. So any environment is possible for us to pull it. I say this because a lot of our larger customers have security domains separated out, but still want to have all the data centralized. That's also a possibility within here. The roles part is managed essentially through our system. So when you install us, you will get 2 hard-coded roles, which is administrators and operators. Administrators is obvious. Those are the guys that keep this thing running. You can use any group or profile already available within Active Directory. So essentially coming in here and adding more users to the environment is adding simply here. Hit search and it will do a full search out of your Active Directory. I'd recommend narrowing it down to, be the person you want. So if you want Boba Fett to have access to the system, it's simply adding in here. And now he becomes an administrator within our system. So when he logs in, he will get access to all the systems. Administrators get access to everything. There's nothing you can block. Operators, however, you can block. They have a slightly advanced level versus users, but anyone who gets to be placed as an operator will have from the administration access to boards that they're allowed to see. So the board that we created during this demonstration, I'll just come in and search for in here, SQL for order entry, add that, and now anyone within the operator role will have access to order entry. And you can see here, there's also limiting rights to it, where if I was to apply read-only, they cannot interact with the data, but they can just see the information as is. So that's where we limit them from being able to close or operate the alerts. Keep in mind that even read-only or non-read-only still does not grant them access to the underlying data source. They still need that separated out for them. Giving them access to integrations allows them to see the alerts and navigate through the system. And potentially, if you've not got them on read-only on everything, they can actually create their own boards based on the data that you've granted them from integrations. Outside of that, you can keep adding as many roles as you want. Any users that you add separately from this will not have the ability to create boards, but will have the ability to view them and operate them if given read-only access or more than read-only access. And again, it automatically locks into Active Directory, so you don't have to create accounts, create passwords, or anything like that. Essentially, we just log in with the user. So as long as the user is capable of working within your domain, he or she will have access to the web page from here.